My name is Ron Soy, 19 years old, from South Philadelphia. I saw today my uncles and his friends gathered around for the 6:30 evening news, which they usually put their attention towards football games on TV while drinking their rounds of Heineken. They heard it first in the Khmer news that Grandpa usually watched. The Prime Minister of Cambodia was shot dead. We all couldn't believe it. The iron-fisted rule of this man for many decades had come to an end. It was in Cambodia, in the capital of Phnom Penh, where he was assassinated. He was shot when he left his podium on stage in front of an audience. Who was this assassin? No, he wasn't from the opposition party or a supporter of it. No, he wasn't one of those whose homes were destroyed to make way for official developments. No, he wasn't a relative of someone who the Prime Minister allegedly had assassinated. No, he wasn't a member of the press who he censored or tried to shut up and through threats or violence. No, he wasn't of the poor who didn't really benefited from his policies. No, he wasn't of the Cambodian communities from outside of Cambodia. He was a tourist, a Chinese tourist. They said he was crazy and had a lot of emotional issues. We were all excited, yet I can see in my uncle's eyes as well as my grandpa's worry and hesitation. The Prime Minister had held Cambodia together for many years, even though he was a cruel dictator. We all wondered what's going to happen now. It was exciting to see the news blazing through the TV screens about our motherland. People these days, I think, in America can barely locate Cambodia on a map. Grandpa walked towards me in the living room as I watched the TV with my uncles and their friends. He grabbed my hand and ushered me to the family altar. He wanted me to pray to Grandma and other family members who passed away, pray to them to watch over us. Why? I asked him. Whenever there were instances for extreme worry in our family, Grandpa would have all of us light the incense and pray at our family altar. Grandpa looked at me in the eyes and said, "Times are changing. Nothing lasts forever in this world, not even happiness." I looked at him puzzled. He continued on, "That's why happiness is a very precious thing. Because things that last forever to us are never really that special to us." Grandpa acted very odd today. He rarely spoke, and at most times he was bedridden. He lighted the incense for us. We knelt down on our knees, our hands in prayer holding the incense. We prayed. And I prayed for only a short time. I was not as religious as my uncles, who prayed longer than me and had karmic tattoos on their bodies to protect them from harm. I went back to the living room. For whatever reason, I kept staring at the Angkor Wat painting. I stared at it for a long time. And Uncle Dan came over to me and said, "Did you know Angkor Wat is the biggest temple in the world?" "Yes, Bhutan. We Cambodians built a lot of great things in the past, didn't we?" "Yeah, in the past." "You're so cynical. The future is looking bright for us around the world, even more so since that dictator is dead." I had a cold feeling around my neck as I stood in front of the painting and sorting out in my brain what Uncle Dan just said to me. It keeps happening, this awful cold feeling that I have when something bad is about to be revealed. I didn't want to think too much as I get scared easily by things that don't make sense in the physical world. I had registered as a student for Community College of Philadelphia, and I started classes in September. It was exciting for my family that I would be the first one to go to college, but at times I'd rather would go to University of Pennsylvania. It still would cost a lot of money to go there if I had went. I don't have a particular major at the moment. I'm still trying to decide. In my neighborhood, the old Khmer men who stood by the Cambodian coffee shop shouted out news to each other on how revolution was going to take place in Cambodia, and that people had to prepare. Across the street was the Khmer Chinese owner of the laundromat standing by there and shouting at his cell phone. "That bastard prime minister is dead. I don't care. Revolution or not, I'm going back to my son." His son, Pitch, was deported back to Cambodia. They say he wasn't technically a citizen. To us in the community, it seemed rather unfair that they would take him away for a crime he did 20 years ago and paid for it in jail. Even though he turned his life around, it still wasn't enough. The news didn't linger on for much longer on the assassination. They focused more on Donald Trump's handling of the big virus from before. The world is going crazy around me. Yeah, I try to focus on my studies, but I feel my head spinning. I awoke in the morning to hear news in Khmer that people were being massacred in Cambodia. I looked at Grandpa and his eyes were full of discomfort as he looked at the TV. I asked Grandpa what the news was about. "They're rioting and killing the Vietnamese in Cambodia." I grew disheartened that we would be capable of so much hate towards the other, even though the Vietnamese had a history of treating us bad, influencing our government and taking over our lands. The poor ones who lived here for generations didn't have to suffer in the end like this. There was an old saying about the Vietnamese and how they were to the Khmer people. The old saying would state that the Vietnamese would bury the Khmer and put a pot of boiling water over their heads. Even though there was some truth to that, no one should have to suffer due to the actions of others. My uncles were uncomfortable as well, but they were sort of indifferent. Bupia would say, "They have their own country, Vietnam. Why bother staying here if you're not wanted?" And I replied, "But that's like saying we have our own country, Cambodia. Why bother staying in America or other places if we have Cambodia?" "That's true." Bupia smiled at me. "Cambodia is headed down towards shit, and we might have a war with Vietnam." Busak said, "How can we go to the Vietnamese restaurants at the Washington plazas with a straight face after what's happened back there? If I were Vietnamese, I wouldn't want some Cambodian to be there either." Lim said to him, "Ron can always go to buy the Vietnamese hoagies. They wouldn't really notice Ron since he was light-skinned." The Khmer News reported a lot of damages and killings. Cambodia seems to be most certainly headed towards another catastrophe since the Khmer Rouge genocide. I guess that was the most shameful part. It was that we were repeating history. I went to art class and they had us drawing still life. How boring, yet so peaceful still. I imagined what life would be like had I been born and raised in Cambodia. Life would be so chaotic and full of struggle. Over here it's okay. I wouldn't say peaceful and with no struggle at all. We have the orange one as the president, and there are people out there now who feel like they can do anything destructive as they please because of that asshole in the White House. I woke up in the middle of the night to hear a text from my phone. It was my cousin, Jenny. It read, Angkor Wat has been bombed. My body froze. I was in disbelief. Was it the same Angkor Wat? The crowning achievement of Cambodian pride and the biggest temple in the world. Was it the same temple adorned upon every Cambodian flag, on every wall of a Cambodian house? The question now would be why, and who would do such a thing? It's still the middle of the night. I can't sleep, not after what I heard happened, but I have to get some sleep because I have classes tomorrow. The world is burning before my very eyes. We have barely recovered from the virus. Cambodia is headed towards destruction. The orange president is acting dangerously stupid to wherever he goes. Today, as the sun will rise, will be a terrible day to begin. I have a feeling it will be. I'm studying hard for the final exams coming up. Hours ago, when my uncles and I were eating together, we were talking over each other on who would drop a bomb on Angkor Wat. Feeling sleepy to write on, to be continued. We found out. It was puzzling and shocking at the same time. It was an Australian who took a Thai aircraft and dropped a bomb on Angkor Wat. The Thais claimed the Australian hijacked the airjet on his own and dropped the bomb. He disappeared into the jungles, and they're still looking for him. As we were eating dinner, Boomerang shouted out, "They expect us to believe this bullshit? The Thais must be in on it. They wanted to take over Cambodia when everything over there is in chaos now." Man, that's 2 foreign nationals now. Bu Ren dipped the beef in the broth and then said after that, "It's got to be a coincidence." No way, with all the problems we hear in the news about China and Australia. They can't be that shitty to want to have problems with us too. My uncles and I were all angry and confused at the same time. Some of my uncles were drinking and full of anger and tears that our Angkor Wat is destroyed. There are rumors within our Cambodian communities that there are people planning for revenge. Revenge. But against who?